Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani, and as always, we have a lot to get into. We're going to talk about the Penguins, who are less than a week away for the trade deadline. What do they do? We'll get into some Pirates a little bit later, but the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown is going to be the Steelers at the Combine and in free agency soon to be. Let's talk about it with our panel. We have Will Graves from the Associated Press here with us tonight.
Shout out, Wanda.
Wanda, and you're no relation to Ryan Graves from all we know, correct?
I am probably the more liked Graves, which is the bar is pretty low, though. Very low.
And we have Ray Fittipaldo, who covers the Steelers with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as does Mr. Brian Batko, all here talking about our #1 topic, which is, Ray, I'll start with you. You were there in Indianapolis. What do the Steelers do at quarterback? It's the question we've been asking week after week. This week, some indication was Russell Wilson had the, quote, pole position. Now it's Justin Fields. Is it one of those two, or is it someone else?
Yeah, Bob, I think it's going to be one of those two, and I think if we were talking a week from now, we'd know the answer. March 10th is the first day of the legal tampering period. They're going to have to know by then. But if you had to ask me right now, I'd say they're leaning towards Justin Fields, but I'm completely keeping the door open for Russell Wilson as well.
Yeah, when everybody wakes up tomorrow morning, they will be a week away from a real, true deadline of when things are going to start happening around the NFL. And Omar Khan, the general manager's big buzz quote this week was all options are on the table at quarterback. Well, one of those options fell off the table midweek. Matthew Stafford is going back to the Rams.
You didn't think that was really on the table, do you?
For the Steelers, why would you not be interested? But for Stafford, yes, probably not very interested in coming here.
But, I mean, why should the Steelers be interested in Matthew Stafford?
Because he's probably better than both options that Bob just mentioned.
Does he make you better than Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow? He does not.
At least
he's a Hall of
closer.
Famer, but he's literally taller Russell Wilson and maybe not as much maintenance, right? I mean, he's less mobile.
He's better than Russell Wilson, I think.
But yes, playing for Sean McVay on a team. Look, he didn't have much around him this year. He got killed, but would you want Matthew Stafford? How long does Matthew Stafford last playing behind this line and playing for Arthur Smith?
Well, that's a great point. But don't you think this whole thing was Matthew Stafford? Go find out what the market value is, then we'll pay you.
Right.
So, I mean, they let these other teams do the negotiating for them. But you're right, Will. I mean, in a perfect scenario, if Broderick Jones made that transition to left really good, if Troy Fautanu is healthy, then maybe you could have a guy like Matthew Stafford. But you don't know what that line's going to be, and that's a big gamble.
Well, it's a moot point now, and to raise what he mentioned, there was a shrewd move by the Rams to do it that way. And I initially was thinking, if any team's actually going to trade for him, aren't you going to be a little leery if the Rams are giving up on the guy? I would think the Rams would know better than anybody how much he has left in the tank. Well, now maybe those teams would be vindicated to some extent because they do want him back.
But I mean, look, do we think that the Steelers are any closer to the top than they've been any of the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years? No. I would pick the kid that can run, and I would pick the guy that would be cheaper. And Justin Fields checks both of those boxes. I would avoid Russ because you are just taking another turn on the hamster wheel.
Plus, I've said, and I still believe this, there is some upside in what you see from Justin Fields. I think he can grow as a pocket passer. At least I hope so. You mentioned deadlines, Ray.
Yeah.
How about if it comes and goes and there is no contract and they go into free agency? Can you see that scenario even existing?
I mean, if it would come to that, Bob, then I truly think it would be all options on the table. And people don't want to hear this, but if it got to that point and Russell Wilson wants to go to the Giants, Justin Fields, maybe I'll go to the Jets. Is Aaron Rodgers really a possibility? I mean, they're not close, but if you're going to get away from the two guys you have in-house and there are no other option, where are you going to go at that point?
I mean, well, I'm sure we'll talk about this later. I wouldn't draft anybody in the first round and put that on him.
No.
And Aaron Rodgers, again, it's like, you're spinning your wheels. This is.
Plus, he's 41, not 37. These other guys are 40
I mean, and
years
look,
younger.
I think professionally, I'm speaking for all three of us, I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to have to watch McAfee every Tuesday to see what he says.
Apparently, that's not happening again. Maybe not. Maybe so. Who knows?
Well, if he comes to Pat McAfee's home city, maybe he would. But no, I mean, would he get you closer? That's the big question. Would he put you in that tier? Probably not, based on what we saw last season. A lot of baggage there. We're going to keep kicking this quarterback question around, probably for only one more week. But to Ray's point there, yeah, if they don't get something done with Justin Fields this upcoming week, and I would imagine they'll have to blow him away contract-wise, and then it becomes the old negotiation of how good do you feel about Fields to give him that kind of money to
Well,
keep him from all his options.
I think if I'm Justin Fields, I'd say to myself and my agent, okay, you guys did not pick up my fifth-year option. You could have had me for $25 million. Now I want that money and more, and that may be a starting point. I want to ask you, you mentioned you're not interested in other quarterbacks. How I'm play the game that if you are. They have these picks. I mean, would you take anyone, third, fourth, fifth round? I
think a camp arm for sure. Yeah, I would definitely take a camp arm.
Are you wasting a pick for a camp arm? If you really don't believe the guy's going to develop, should you do that? Or just
have they shown any ability to develop quarterbacks?
They've had one chance, really, in Kenny Pickett with this newish regime.
But I mean, Mason, look, how many games did Mason play? Mason, heck, started almost an entire season.
Well, you could argue that the new regime hasn't had any chances other than Justin Fields to this point, and
but Mike T, the head coach has been the head coach, so he has to kind of wear
the offensive leadership, the offensive coordinator, quarterback.
Well, give me a name, though. Ray, I want to start with you. If you had one name, now we saw Jackson Dart in a mock draft going in the first round. I think that stuff gets out of control.
Yeah.
What of these guys? Is it Jalen Milroe? Is it him? Dart? Is it other guys? Will Howard? Which guy would you want to see if they took one?
You mentioned all three, so I'll give you rounds on all three. Jackson Dart would intrigue me in the second round. Milroe and Will Howard would third or fourth round. I would do that if I was the Steelers.
Fourth or fifth, I'll give you a name, Tyler Shuck from Louisville. Now, he's 26. He's almost as old as Justin Fields, and he's going to be a rookie in the NFL. 7 years, I think it was, in college. I mean, a bunch of injuries at Oregon, Texas Tech, but he did play really well this past year at Louisville. He's a legitimate 6'5". He can run a little bit. That's somebody who, he wouldn't be a camp arm like Will said. I mean, this would be somebody who's a backup at first and maybe even competing to start depending on who else they bring in.
But I mean, if they take somebody like Jackson Dart in the second round, the clock automatically starts, and whoever quarterback you bring in, if you sign Justin Fields for 3 years and $90 million, which would be way overpaying. I don't know what his market is, but like the clock immediately starts if you take a quarterback in the second round.
Yeah,
and that's not good.
Got to go to break on that. We'll switch to wide receiver, running back, and other stuff concerning the Steelers. Also, you saw a big trade yesterday. Deebo Samuel heads to Washington. What about Brandon Ayuk? We're going to hear that name. What about Devontae Adams? It's all coming up next. All right, the Steelers are dealing with George Pickens. I'll get into that in a second. But Brian Batko, first I want to ask you this question. We saw Deebo Samuel move from San Francisco to Washington. Only a fifth-round pick. Should the Steelers have invested something in that conversation?
That's always going to be the natural question when you see a move like this. And this was even within their own conference in the NFC, the Niners to the Commanders. I suppose I wouldn't have hated that move for the Steelers, but everyone's talking about the draft compensation, Bob, the fifth rounder. It's really more so about the Commanders are going to have to take on his hefty contract for a guy who seemed out of shape when he got there last year and clearly not as productive last season with San Francisco. So I don't blame the Steelers for not beating that offer.
I think the Steelers and a lot of other teams were waiting to see if he was cut, and then if he's cut, negotiate on your own terms. You don't have to pick up that $18 million. Only one 1,000-yard season in his entire career. He's a very good player, does a lot of different things, but I don't know what you're.
Look, as the resident Commanders guy in town here, I mean, I could say he'll basically be like a tight end. I mean, the way that offense is a lot of short passes. He will have like 65 catches for 600 yards, 3 touchdowns, and convert 1 million third and threes and fourth and twos, right? And they have one of the in the top 5 in most cap space, so like they can take a flyer. If the Steelers had paid $18 million to that guy, George Pickens. Oh my God! Like, can you imagine what his agent would have thought? Like, I mean, so like it's good that the Steelers did not make that move.
Ray, what about George Pickens? Is he going to play this year out, or do you suspect they'll give him a deal?
I can't see any scenario, Bob, where they extend him, sign him to a new contract. So I think the most likely scenario is you go into the season, you don't give him a new deal, and if he's a problem, then you got the trade deadline at the end of October. You can see what you can get for him at that point. But I won't close the door next week on a trade, and I won't close the door draft day on a trade either. Either way, I don't think he's here long term.
Yeah, my take lines up with Ray. I tend to agree that I think everyone will kind of grit their teeth and go through it for another year. Now, ask me in 4 months, I guess, if George is holding out of training camp, or ask me in 2 months if he's holding out of OTAs, or holding in, I guess, is the new thing now. But I thought Omar Khan, he doesn't say much in these instances, but I thought reading between the lines, he was a little more bullish on George Pickens than he was a year ago when he was asked about Deontay Johnson. And we know how that played out, 2 or 3 weeks later. they traded him to Carolina for very little.
I mean, I would trade him sooner rather than later because to Ray's point, the reason they would trade him in October is either the season is terrible or he's pouted his way out of town. His value is going to be super low. So what are you going to get for him, right?
Yeah, but what if T. Higgins reportedly is going to be franchised now? That takes him off the board, right? What do you do if you do that? If you trade him, you draft a wide receiver.
But look, we're in that room every week. We're in that room every week. Do we think? Do you guys think that he's going to handle it the way Najee handled it?
He's high maintenance. He's very high maintenance. He's a lot to deal with on a daily basis. But they
drafted him for the talent, too.
Yeah, and to Bob's point, I don't think Cooper Kupp is coming here. And with George, Will, you're right. We're in there every day. We see what goes on and kind of how, I guess, immature he is. But only the Steelers know if there's any hope of the light going on because they're the ones that talk to him behind closed doors.
Yeah, listen, the Steelers knew he was going to be a project emotionally when they got him. They didn't know it was going to be to this extent. Like Brian said, you probably grit your teeth and see if you can live with him for another 6-8 months, but not long.
Okay, I have a minute left. I want to talk about Najee Harris because Jerry Dulac of your paper over there also suggests that maybe there is a way to get him here for another few years. Number one, would you endorse it? Number two, how much would you pay for Najee?
I would say James Conner got 3 years, $18 million, right? Was that what his deal? That is a fine ballpark for Najee, but I would not. He's been dependable. He's been reliable, but he's not Saquon. He's not Derrick Henry. He's not a $10 to $12 million running back.
Watch out for the free agent running back market. I don't think it's going to be good. Stacked running back class in the draft, $5-6 million a year. I'd do that.
I think Najee goes back out west somewhere. I don't want to say the bridge was burned when they declined his option, but I think they took some hammers to it on both sides there, and it looks good for him and the Steelers if it gets out there that they're at least still talking.
Yeah, all of these things will come into focus this week, you would think, at least by March 10th or March 12th. I always love legal tampering, such an interesting name, for a period of time where they do probably what they do before legal tampering, which is illegal tampering. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Penguins. They're going to be tampering in the trade market. What do they do next? All right, welcome back. Talking about the Penguins who lost again today. Erik Karlsson did the Penguins no favors if they were trying to move him. I know he has a no movement clause, but man, he looked bad at the end of the second period. Two massive mistakes that led to Toronto scoring their last goal with 0.1 seconds left in the second period, and that's a killer. So, I want to talk, first of all, congratulations on the success of the Washington Capitals. I know, it's pretty amazing what they've done.
And what did they do? They realized last year and the year before that they weren't really in it. They got a little help because they had some of the guys that were part of their big three. Right. Go on LTIR or long-term whatever injured reserve,
which means you don't have to worry about.
So they did not have the problems that the loyalties. They didn't have the issues that the Penguins have had. But man, this thing they should have been doing this 3 or 4 years ago. I mean,
but they haven't, so that leaves them to where they are.
I mean, and it's look, I credit Dubas. When he got here, he had to take some chances. I think they was told can you try to thread this needle? It's been unsuccessful. Burn everything. I mean, if you can, but the problem is, what's the trade value for Erik Karlsson right now? What's the trade value for Tristan Jarry? What's the trade value for Ryan Graves?
Has the biggest trade value. He had 28 goals now, 2 more today. So he's the guy. But then Sidney Crosby likes playing with him, and Crosby is the captain of the team. They want to make sure, not that he dictates what goes on, but they're appreciative of what he has to think. Yeah. I still believe, Will, you got to do that, Ray, don't you? I mean, you have to figure out how to get assets here to start this process, because if you don't, you could be like Detroit. How many years has it been since they've been in the playoffs? Chicago. Same thing.
I mean, at this point, do you want to just trade the contract? I mean,
exactly.
You're not.
We'll take half the money.
4th or 5th round pick in return, and please take this contract. I mean, it was a bad signing to begin with. Maybe there's a team that's in contention, needs a power play specialist. He plays half the ice time he's playing here. I think that would be an ideal scenario. Just get rid of the contract.
I mean, to Will's point, burn everything. Last time someone said burn the boats around here was Arthur Smith before Steelers-Ravens in the wild card game, and we saw how that played out. But no, I mean, I thought they played hard today, the second of a back-to-back at home. But the results of the games at this point kind of just, it's meaningless. It's more about the big picture for them. And yeah, Raquel in the game he had, what that does for his trade value, does that make him more likely to be on the move for Friday? I mean, does that make it more likely that maybe you can get more for him this offseason? At least they've got that going for them because, at this stage of the year, I think it's more about the individual machinations and what Kyle Dubas can do with the developments that take place on the ice.
The biggest thing he has to do, I think, right now is try to figure out goaltenders. they've gone from a position of strength when they had Murray and Fleury and Gustafsson in their system. Now all of a sudden they have no answers there, Will. How do you change the quarterback?
Yoel might turn out to be pretty good. They got the other kid in Wilkes-Barre that might be pretty good. But, I mean, the part of the problem is, like, it's the players in front of them that are a big part of the problem.
But today's game-winning goal, come on. Nylander was all alone. You got to make that save, don't you? There was nothing in front of him.
I agree, but like that 3-on-3, that stuff just sort of happens, all right? I mean, like goalies get beat in that situation all the time. Let's remember the season began with a 6-0 loss at home to the Rangers. And like when we were after that game, a friend of ours in the media walked by and said, this might be the worst defensive Penguins team I've seen in 20 years. And that was night one, and it has not gotten any better, right? I mean, so like, is it the goaltending? Yeah. But, like, man, it is a whole gobbledygook thing. I think that if they got some responsible, smart guys playing in front of Ned or, Blomqvist, I think you have a chance.
Let's say I have two guys, Larson, they like him, they like Miroshov, those guys, but, I mean, they're so far away. What would you do, Brian, in terms of this kind of situation?
It does make it difficult to evaluate, like Will said, how much of it is the defensive issues, how much of it is the goaltending. The answer to me is pretty obvious. I think you got to trade for Kirk Cousins.
Or Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Bring him in there.
Pray for that lottery ball.
Are you agreeing with Will there should be a total reclamation here? Just start over, trade as much as you can? Or do you think you have to they've been riding that line right down the middle so far?
Capitals are a great model. They were bad for only 1 or 2 years. Now they're back up at the top. They're going to have another shot with Ovi, late stages. I don't know if the Penguins can do it now with Crosby. It might be too late, but I think that's a great model.
All right, we got to go to a break on that note. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Pirates, who got some pop in their lineup today from two guys that they really hope are there and legit throughout the course of the season. That's coming up next right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Hey, the Pirates played today. They lost, but they got a couple of big home runs, one from Henry Davis, one from Endy Rodriguez. The topic of this conversation to start will be, Will Graves, Henry Davis. He's a #1 pick. To me, they have to bring him north. To me, they have to find ways to play him. Joey Bart's not going to play all the time, so they needs a backup catcher. I know Endy Rodriguez is in this conversation. Andrew McCutchen's not going to be a DH every single day. Find places for him. Do they have to do that, or do they have to still wait? When he goes to the minors, he rakes. When he comes up here, he doesn't.
No, I think, look, his biggest problem, which is weird, is that he can't hit the fastball in the major leagues, right? Where at Louisville, that's all he did was crush fastballs. I think he deserves a chance early in the season to see if he sort of corrected that problem. And they have too much invested in him. He's a 1-1. He's a 1-1. This is year 5. Like, come on. What are we doing here? He's got to play.
Right. Sending him to the minors doesn't really accomplish much again.
And don't run him out there for 3 weeks. If he's batting 150, then don't just sit him on the bench or send him down. Run him out there for 2.5 months, see what he can do. Just get an answer long term.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, flirting with this being one of the worst first overall picks if it doesn't pan out, I would want to find out sooner than later, probably, if that is going to be the case. And, yeah, I mean, he's 25 now. You got to see it at some point, and maybe this spring training gets some of his confidence back, and maybe that's good for him. I'm with you, Bob. I think, bring him up for the opening day roster and see what he can do.
What do they need? They need somebody that can hit the ball. They need somebody that gets the ball to the yard. And he did it today. That's good. That's a promising. I know it's spring training, but it'll help his confidence. I know it doesn't count. What other options do they really have? I mean, Gorski looks like he's raking, so he's putting himself in the conversation at first. But they need guys that can hit the ball.
Yeah, and maybe he's DHing sometimes. Maybe he's getting some big pinch hit at bats late in games.
I'd rather see him 5 days a week somehow play in the lineup. All right, let's talk about this. The win total for the Pirates is 76.5, same exact that it was last year. So the question is, I think they're going to be a team that could be in every single game because of their pitching, Will. They haven't done anything this offseason to change that. Can they win these kinds of games? And do you
have to win these. They have.
Do you suspect they can be a wild card team this year?
I mean, I think I could see them making a leap. With a full year of Skeens, let's assume Jones takes a step forward. We get Keller, first half Keller all season. Yes. I mean, I think it's okay. But are they? Yeah, I think 85. They could be an 85-win team, which would put them in the conversation into late September.
Not me. They didn't do anything, Bob, and you're going to have Keller get back to where he was. Skeens is going to have to win the Cy Young. I think they're below 76 wins.
Yeah, I'd probably take the under on that too, or maybe put myself in the Pirates the same way I view the Steelers these days, of I will just keep hammering the status quo until I see otherwise. 9-8, 10-7, first-round playoff exit or nothing, and kind of the same deal with the Pirates, right there with the Vegas win total. But if I was pressed on it, I'd probably go under, because, just way too underwhelmed with the moves or lack there.
In a weird way, I would feel better if they had gone back to the unbalanced schedule, because nobody in the Central really did anything. There were no major. The Brewers did. Brewers did nothing.
The Reds did.
Look, Tito is probably worth at least 3 or 4 wins for them.
He's a
right?
good manager.
And they've got some good young talent there. But the Cubs, they got Kyle Tucker, but they didn't do that much else. The Cardinals
It's a winnable division.
The Cardinals
which is
are
why I
trying.
didn't
So
understand
if
why
they
didn't
were playing
spend any
19,
money.
if they were playing 19
Spend.
games against them like they were before they went to this, everybody plays everybody all the time, I'd feel a little more comfortable. But I still think if the majority, that's 70 games against, they can be, if they can win 40 of those games, they'll be in the wild card race.
Well, I will say this: if they don't get a chance because they don't have enough offense and their pitching is elite, they're going to look back at this offseason and say, what do we do? Because that's what I'm saying right now. Anyway, I want to talk to you about number 1 Cochran, because number 1 Cochran Ford has just added a 5th store. And to celebrate the new number 1 Cochran Ford Youngstown, all of their Western Pennsylvania locations have Ford Fab 5 grand opening savings just for you. Pick any one of their 3 different $500 offers when you buy or lease a new Ford. Plus, you will enjoy 5 times the selection with more than 950 models available. Learn more, Cochran.com, or visit number 1 Cochran Ford, Monroeville, Allegheny Valley, or Butler County. All right, it's been fun. We are done. Thanks to these guys for coming in on a Sunday night. Appreciate it. We'll do it again in the future. Thanks for joining us for the number 1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Good night.